Sorry. What I want everyone to think about is that I'm not talking about tennis. I'm talking about rackets. So what we know about rackets is in the last 15 years, and I'm not speaking in the last 6 months with the COVID bump, is that tennis has been flat in this country. With the exception of 2019 where it rose 1%, it's been flat. And in that last 15 years, what we've seen is an incredible rise in other racket sports. Pickleball has grown over 25% annually, year over year. Squash and paddle have had double-digit growth, and even sports like padel and pop tennis are popping in. It's interesting to say that 750,000 new tennis players last year alone came from pickleball. So what we found is in the absence of tennis, we've really created a new industry of rackets. And in many ways, we are now entering the golden age of rackets. And that's where the opportunity for clubs across the country really is. The key to rackets is understanding a total rackets program. Simply put, a total rackets program is one racket sport working to grow all racket sports. It is not only having multiple racket sports, but being able to play, coach, program, staff, and connect the dots through all racket sports, which ultimately grows member participation and retention across the board. So what that means is it's being able to go on the court and focus on pickleball, and then be able to take those members and explain to them how pickleball will help their tennis, how it will help their paddle, how tennis can help your pickleball, how tennis can help your squash. It's connecting the dots for members between racket sports. If you have 4 different sports and you have 100 people that play tennis, 100 play paddle, 100 that play pickleball, and then they go home, you're not maximizing. If you can get 100 people that play tennis and then half of them go and play pickleball, and then half of those go and play squash, you're now connecting the dots and growing all of your programs together. But all of that is going to start with the director. And understanding the right director, just like understanding the right GM, is pivotal to the success of your club. The director of rackets has to be an expert in everything. You can fake it in tennis. In many ways, tennis was so huge in the 70s and the 80s that we got really good at doing the same thing. And pros in tennis especially get away with doing a lot of the same thing day in and day out. You can't do that with rackets. See, with rackets is if you put a tennis pro on the court to teach pickleball and they wing it, people won't stay. If you put a tennis pro on a paddle court that doesn't know paddle, people won't stay. And you only get one shot at a first impression. It comes down to being passionate and invested in what you do. All of my success that I've had in rackets, and even to today, is because I'm passionate and invested and I go all in. When I started pickleball, I didn't just wing it. I started playing it. I got an understanding. In many ways, you have to be okay with failure, because as your successes go up, so should your failures. If a director is not willing to fail, they're not going to innovate. The members won't have value. You will not create options. So it's in that realm of understanding of always thinking about what's next. A director has to be a leader. It's not telling people what to do, but it's showing them by example. It's taking them onto the courts. It's teaching them about things that have nothing to do with rackets. What do you do on LinkedIn? How do you progress their career years later on? You see, every director has 2 responsibilities. First and foremost to our clubs and members, and second to the industry. I fully believe that our staff touches more people in 1 week than any director will touch in a month, maybe 2. And within that, it's our job as mentors to be able to take our staff and in 2 to 3 years, be able to turn them into directors. And as they become directors, they're going to advance the industry at their clubs doing the same thing. Mentorship is one of the most important things. And I've been lucky, to have a few mentors in my life that have really changed my career. But the one thing I've learned is that mentorship works 2 ways. And I can tell you that many people that have come in and worked with me over the summer or have gone off to be directors have taught me things that I never would have even thought of. Mentorship is not only teaching, but it's being open to learn. And the thing that when you think about directors or GMs is complacency is what kills you. And all programs, especially in rackets, will die in 3 to 5 years. So as we are advancing careers of our staff who have now learned and they're leading their own programs, we're bringing in new programs, we're bringing in new people. We're all about people. And as those people come in, they're bringing in new ideas and more life. and more excitement, and you're changing, continually changing experiences for members. Um, my road to a Total Rackets program was probably similar to many people's roads to being GMs or directors. You know, I was 25 when I became a director. In many ways, I wasn't ready. In many ways, I was ready. And I don't think there's ever a point in your career where you're either, you know, you have everything you need to do a great job. But I always think it comes down to knowing what motivates you and what keeps you up at night. And I can tell you, and Ken can tell you because I sure as hell text him enough, is that what keeps me up at night is my courts being empty. And ever since day one, when I became a director, the number one thing I wanted, I wanted to be the best, fill my courts, have the biggest clinics, the most contracts. But at the core of it, I wanted my courts to be filled. The worst thing in my mind is having courts that are empty. That's the worst thing you can have. And as you're filling courts, you're growing programs. You're changing, if courts, by the time that the courts are going to be filled, who you're focused on. Is it adults? Is it juniors? You can't grow when things are going bad. You have to grow when things are going well. Anybody, and that's also the hardest thing in this industry. The more successful you get at something, the harder it is to change. The harder it is to say, maybe it's time that I need to look for something else. But that's exactly the time you have to do it. So for me, when everything was at its highest, when it's a time when most people would sit back and feel good and just take a breather, that's when I was most anxious. And I know me and my personality, when I'm anxious is when I'm doing my best. And that's really what led me to pickleball. I knew we couldn't grow anymore in tennis. And there's always room to grow somewhere. And that was really, it was about 8 years ago now, maybe 9, that I started pickleball, where I looked and I started to understand trends. And if you're always thinking about trends, you have to be able to guess, just like GMs in clubhouses and everywhere else, you have to be able to guess based off the trends where the game's going. And pickleball, it came down to noticing at parks how many people were playing, how easy it was, the excitement level, and how I thought that would bring value to my club. And in anything, it was taking a chance. It could have failed. It could have, and many people still fail at pickleball, even though it has tremendous growth because they're not passionate and invested. But it was a decision that ultimately changed my career. So for me, understanding trends is this. I can tell you that when I started pickleball, we started 1 day a week and we grew to 7 days a week. I can tell you that $10 a person brought us over $100,000 a year in revenue. I could tell you that we had the largest pickleball camp and made almost $50,000 in a weekend, or that tournaments bring in between $13,000 and $15,000 a weekend. That's a lot of money. And if I was to tell you just that, I'd be failing you, because pickleball is not about revenue. And this is where people get it wrong. Tennis shouldn't be about revenue. Paddle shouldn't. Individual sports, you can focus on revenue. Rackets is about participation. So when I look at all those numbers, what I see is that 750 to 1,000 players a week were on my tennis courts. I didn't care that they were playing pickleball. I didn't care what they were doing. That was 750 to 1,000 opportunities for me to connect the dots between pickleball, tennis, paddle, squash, whatever else I was offering at the time. And then it comes down to your staff. Do you have the right staff in place that can connect the dots? Because one director can't touch 750 people a week, but a staff can. A great staff that's just as committed as a director can change a whole program. So when I look at 3 indoor tennis courts, what I see as a director is I see the availability to have 12 people playing tennis. I see the option to put 10 to 12 pickleball courts, have 50 to 60 people playing pickleball. I see 1 revenue stream becoming 2, 1 amenity becoming 2. So now my members have more options. My staff has more responsibility, but also more options. And we have an ability to grow. So now there's no more dead time. I see that on those same 3 courts that if I did a tennis camp, I would have 12 to 16 people. But by doing pickleball camps, I could have 50 people. So I could tell you based off of 50 people that we brought in almost $6,000. But that would be lying to you. Not about the money, but about the true potential. See, what on average, that was 50 to 60 people, which were 50 to 60 opportunities to grow my tennis program through pickleball. And on average, 30% of people that play tennis with a full running total rackets program have crossover, 30%. So that means if you have 100 people playing tennis, 30% of those players, or sorry, if you have 100 people playing pickleball, 30% of those players will cross over and either play tennis or paddle or one of your other sports. Baltimore Country Club has an 85% crossover rate between the 4 racket sports we offer. And with a membership of almost 3,300 members, you can see how substantial connecting the dots can really be. I can tell you from this summer alone, when you have 4 women that play tennis for an hour and a half to 2 hours, that now can go down and play pickleball for another hour and a half to 2 hours, and now they're going to go have lunch because they were here so long. Club utilization time just went from an hour and a half to over 5 hours, which means we need somewhere to do, so they need something to do with their kids, which led to camps going up. Add on discounts that we did for siblings and having a junior program for every single adult program, you have insane crossover rate, and that's connecting the dots throughout the whole club. So in the end, what this is really saying is if you control the numbers, you control the numbers. It's not about how much money you can get out of one person. It's about how many people you can get on a single court at one time, creating a great experience. If you can control the numbers through participation, I promise you, you will control the total numbers in revenue. They are one and the same. The difference is great directors and great leaders focus on participation. They focus on the experience. Inexperienced people that are short-sighted focus on the revenue. Revenue in rackets is fleeting. It's a roller coaster. Some years are great, some years are not great. But if you focus on the participation, it's no longer a roller coaster and you can continually climb the mountain. So I'm often asked, how do you measure tennis and pickleball, the growth? And the simplest way to think about it is you can measure the amount of people that can play tennis with a yardstick. It would take a football field to measure the amount of people that can play pickleball. And that's because it doesn't matter if you're tall or short, fat or skinny, old or young. It doesn't matter if you have any athleticism. Anybody can play pickleball. What we found, and what Matt told you, is we were up in Connecticut and we did 9 camps at 6 clubs. We had over 250 people. And the overwhelming response from all the directors I had the privilege to meet was that 50% of the people that came to do those clinics have never walked into the facilities of rackets ever. Especially at Weburn Country Club, 50% of those people had never played a racket sport. And I can tell you from calling up and checking with those directors later, those people stayed using rackets, and a lot of them tried tennis. You see, pickleball is, when you look at this country, 99 million people don't do anything with athletics. That means they go to work, they come home, they go to school, they come home. They're just not athletic. It's not something they're into. But that is the type of person that pickleball initially attracts. It can bring clubs together. It creates more options for members. Also, if there's members that aren't utilizing a club, they're going to leave. This gives more opportunities for whole families to utilize a club. You can play, men can play with women, adults can play with kids, whole families can play together. And that's the beauty of pickleball. It connects the dots through all racket sports. So pickleball, by the very impressive numbers are, in March, I was lucky enough to present to the CMAA National Conference. And at that time, there were about 3.6 million people that played pickleball. Today, as I sit here, there's 5.1 million that play. Now, in 5 years, that number is going to be 16 million people. Now, let's remember that there's less than 18 million people that play tennis. So in 10 years, and I fully believe it's 8, pickleball will be the #1 played racket sport in this country. So think about that. You know, when you think about the true value of this sport, the true value of rackets and connecting the dots, isn't it the smartest thing any club can do to look at the trends and understand the future and know that based off of this, we should be going heavily into pickleball because we know the turnaround will grow our paddle programs. It's going to grow our tennis programs. And I can tell you with certainty, as we enter the golden age of rackets, the thing that's going to grow tennis back in the US, and tennis is still huge around the world, it's still huge in the US, but the thing that's going to put tennis higher, make it more played than ever before in this country, is pickleball. And I can tell you the reason why we have a waiting list for paddle at this club, other than the fact that we need to put 10 more courts in, is the fact that pickleball has brought more people to the club. It's brought squash players to the club. And then because we were able to have the right staffing, we were able to connect the dots for our members. So in the end, it doesn't matter if people play tennis or pickleball or squash, paddle, whatever. All that matters is that they're using your facility. You see, if somebody's going somewhere else to play pickleball, how long do you think until they stay there to play tennis? And then how long do you think until they don't come back to your club at all? You know, I travel around and I hear directors still that say, you know, tennis is super busy. I don't need pickleball. You know, we have paddle. Keep in mind, there's 500,000 people in this country that play paddle. There's 5.1 million that play pickleball and growing. Paddle's still growing. And the key is not one racket sport over the other. It's all racket sports working together. But we always have to understand trends and look to the future. The best clubs, the clubs that are going to thrive in the years to come, and I believe we are entering the greatest time to be working at country clubs, are the clubs that have the most options. And Rackets provides that, with pickleball being the foundation. So when I interviewed at Baltimore Country Club and I looked at the club, you know, I always believe just like mentorship is two ways, interviewing is two ways. You have to also know if it's a good fit for you. And how I looked at the opportunity and the obstacles to success were, I knew that, you know, tennis, nothing happened at this club. It was a golf club. Everybody knows Baltimore Country Club is one of the nicest golf clubs in the country. It's a beautiful platinum club, but rackets was not the focus. But yet I knew that we had 3,300 members. I knew that 60% of our members vacation in Florida, 60%. I know that Florida is the pickleball capital of the country. And if 60% of our members go to Florida, they play pickleball. I also know that we don't have pickleball here when I started, so that it was something that I could add. I knew that we had 9 women's teams in doubles, 9 women's teams in singles, 5 men's doubles teams. We had multiple teams. So the courts were being played on, but there was no programming. I knew that the amenities were there and the opportunity for staffing was there, and I was able to make a list of achievable goals. The key is being able to look at a program and justify achievable goals based off of where you think the program is, where you think it could go in 2 to 5 years, and then 5 to 10 years, and understanding if, in all cases, if the general manager is behind you. And Ken can talk about this later, but, you know, there was a start in the beginning of when I started here, and Ken could have got rid of me, or he could have decided that he was going to go all in and believe in me and trust in the decisions. And I can tell you, if it was another GM, I might not be here. But because he believed in me and backed me and put his support in me, we're now having, you know, one of the largest rackets programs in the country. So when I started here on June 25th of, you know, I don't know, 2.5 years ago, there was no pickleball. By July 1st, we had pickleball lines down on our tennis courts in 1 week. 2 months later, in August, we moved the United States Clay Court Pickleball Championships to the club, where it's been ever since. Rackets is up 390%, not including squash. If you include squash, it's up over 400%. But the most exciting stat to me, and how you understand and connecting the dots throughout clubs, is that 69% of new members came to tennis for the first time. That's 69% of people that have never stepped foot on the tennis court, paddle court, or any rackets facility at Baltimore Country Club are now playing either tennis, paddle, or pickleball, or squash. That's an insane number of crossover. And it's that 85% crossover between racket sports and having a total rackets program that has really allowed that to be possible. So if you don't have space, make space. So when I started here, we put pickleball lines down our tennis court. And 1 year later, I had the idea that we would take out one of our clay court tennis courts and we would put 4 pickleball courts down. And, you know, one of the issues was, well, what do we do on a busy, you know, Saturday when all the tennis courts are busy? And now we're going to lose a tennis court. But again, it goes back to a director that understands trends and is looking toward the future. See, what I knew was that on 4 pickleball courts, I can put 10 and under tennis programs. And on those 4 courts, where we'd usually, if it was 1 tennis court, we'd be able to have 4, maybe 5 juniors. Now I can have 16 juniors, 16 to 20 juniors on those 4 pickleball courts, which creates more tennis courts. I also know that USTA 10 and under programs, for the size of their 10 and under tennis courts, they're going to change to be the same size as pickleball courts. They have to. Pickleball is that big that if USTA doesn't want to miss the ship, they have to adjust by 2 inches, and they're going to. So now we're going to be ahead of the trend in 2 years. So by cutting in one place and being, again, this could have failed. In any case, when you're looking at trends and thinking about the future, you have to be willing to fail. And Kent said when we started here, if you're going to fail, fail big. And I think that all the executives here have done a good job of going all in. And when you think about failing, that's how you get to success. But it's not failing if you go all in your research and your passion and you believe in something. Then it's just something not working out. You've learned a lesson, you grew from it. But because of what we did this past weekend, it was our third year hosting the Clay Court Nationals for pickleball. We had almost 300 people here, and our pickleball courts are the busiest part of our tennis programs. And the reason why tennis is growing so big, I can tell you with certainty, is because of pickleball. And ultimately, for all the clubs in New England and Connecticut and New York and all over, paddle is huge up there. And for us, the demographic for paddle is golfers. So we all know that after the paddle season's over, they go back to golf and they're done for the season. But what we were able to do is when we have a waiting list for paddle, all those guys that played paddle now came the same night to play pickleball. So we had Monday nights, paddle was filled. Now Monday nights and pickleball was filled all summer. And then their wives needed a night. So Wednesday night was filled. And then Dinks and Drinks is a couple's night. So Thursday nights were filled. So, and then when they were all doing pickleball, well, the kids needed something. So tennis clinics were filled. And that's how you connect the dots, thinking about and understanding trends for the future. So what this all means when you break it all down is if you're a one racket sport club, if you're a one racket sport director, you need to do more. If you're a general manager and you still have a director of tennis, you need to start thinking about how to switch the position to director of rackets and understanding again that these people need to be experts in all of rackets. And not every tennis director will be able to fit that mold. That's the issue with the industry. The industry is speeding up right now, and people are not rackets directors yet. And when you think about staffing, people are not rackets pros yet. They're still tennis pros, paddle pros, pickleball pros. And when you look at staffing, for me, I will never hire anybody that doesn't want to be a director. I can't help you. If you want to be a director and you want to be successful, come working here with me is the place to be, because I can give you the tools to be there. And as a GM looking for rackets directors, that's the thing that you need. You can understand passion and innovation and desire to be the best. You can know someone that's thinking ahead in the future. You know somebody that can't sleep at night because they're so excited for an idea that might get shot down 10% of the time. If it's me, it's shot down, 90% of the time?
Probably close.
But it keeps coming. And you want someone that's always thinking about what's next. So director of tennis positions are disappearing all across the country, and they're going to be replaced with director of rackets positions. Same thing here. We don't have individual pros. We have rackets pros. Every one of my tennis pros can teach very well paddle, squash, and pickleball. And when you add squash in that equation, it gets a lot harder. But, as GMs, you need to put the time in. You got to put the money into them. Get your staff certified. Give them the tools that they need to be successful, because ultimately those directors are going to do the same for the staff under them. And as you're helping your club, you're also affecting change in the industry. So this will change how we staff, program, teach, and ultimately how we communicate, because a program means nothing if it can't be communicated and marketed the right way. And COVID-19 has only accelerated all of this. Always focus on the number of players, not the amount of revenue. Participation is the key. You'll never get another shot at a first impression. I promise you. With pickleball, with paddle especially, if you wing it, you'll fail. Be prepared, be ready. Always jumpstart programs through professional clinics. Matt can tell you the response we got just by going up there. I'm lucky enough to have a head pro who's, just after this weekend became one in the country in pickleball with his brother. It goes a long way. People can respond to that. You bring a star into your club. I have pros coming down from all over Connecticut that come here to do paddle. You bring a star down, your members talk about it. It excites them. It brings them back to the courts. Then it's just up to your staff to keep the program going. You cannot fake it with rackets. And I promise you, once you lose them, they're gone forever. So remember, every person on the court provides an opportunity to connect the dots to other racket sports. Keep in mind also, when you think about racket sports, you have to always think differently. the future of all clubs, I promise you, even though the foundation will always be golf, connecting the dots always is going to come from rackets. So with that, I want to introduce my GM, Kent Johnson, who, you know, it's amazing when you see someone that came in to become a GM of a platinum club who had a huge job ahead of him. You know, when he came in, he had to change a lot of staff. He didn't have a tennis director. He didn't have a head pro, but he did far more than that. He created a culture. And I can tell you, when I started being a director, I was one of the people that didn't want to share anything because I was afraid that everybody was going to steal something from me. And if they stole an idea, that they would get the credit for it and that it would ultimately make us look bad and hurt our club. And, you know, Kent has been a pivotal mentor for me that helped me understand that the more we give, the more we get. And the more that we can help the industry, the more we learn. And he's created a culture here that has helped and continues to change my life daily. And I couldn't be more excited to have him share all that with you. So, Kent Johnson.
Thank you, Jarrett. I appreciate the opportunity to be presenting alongside of Jarrett and certainly to all of you. My plan today is really to cover sort of an overview of some of the challenges and the successes that we've experienced over what's been now the last almost 3 years. Much of this is not going to be new information to those of you who are in leadership positions, nor is a degree in neurosurgery required for most of this. But nonetheless, it still bears critical importance. So for me, I started at BCC about 2.5, almost 3 years ago. But the interesting dynamic for me is that I came from a local club that was a quasi-competitor of BCC. So having been there, it gave me the sort of the background of some of the challenges that BCC had faced. You know, we knew that their rackets programs, they were anemic, they were stale, it was one-dimensional at best. We also knew that there were cultural issues, right? The service model that existed at BCC was unobtrusive, wanting for nothing. Now, I don't know how that service model works when you're not supposed to or permitted to engage with your members. That doesn't work. And so I have to be honest that the bar for us, especially in terms of rackets, really wasn't set terribly high. But I also couldn't have told you that within my first week on the job that I was going to get accosted by members about what we were going to be doing with our rackets programs. But it happened. And so one of the things, and what's on your screen now, is on the left what we refer to as our simple truth. And on the right is the club's mission statement. And if I were there in person, what I would ask is for a show of hands of how many of you can recite word for word your club's mission statement. And I'd be willing to bet that some of you can. But then if I ask how many of your staff are able to recite that, I bet that number starts to drop exponentially. But here's the thing. For us, and part of the way that I lead is about creating culture, and it's about creating a simple truth, a single actionable statement that guides every action that we take as far as an operation. And what I love about this is great people doesn't just refer to the types of members that we want to admit into BCC, but it also refers to the types of members that we want, or the types of staff that we want to select to join us. And how important is it? We see this from the McMahon Group. We see this all over, that your club needs to be a favorite place for members. But what about your teams? It also has to be a favorite place for them. And if it's not, then we've got work to do. But if you, your members, and your staff, if you're not regularly visiting and communicating and talking about your mission and your vision, then I've got news for you. It's not working. It is and it will always be about your people. We have to understand that it is more than just selecting people. It's about selecting the right people. And then once we do, making sure that we invest in them, that we take care of them. But when I say take care of them, I don't mean just the perfunctory, are you okay? I mean really take care of them. We have to remember that it is this team that you've selected, they're the ones who are going to execute on your vision. So you need to make sure that you're selecting only those individuals who represent the qualities that you want, that are then going to help perpetuate what your vision is. The rackets director selection for us is a prime example of making sure that you're selecting the right person. So when our rackets director left, we engaged KKW, specifically Len Simard, to do the search for us. And arguably, they brought us a bank of extremely qualified candidates. But as we progressed through the interview process and we got down to our final three, there was no doubt that any one of those three people could have done the job as our director of rackets. None. But when Len said, he goes, what do you think? And I said, you know, I'm really leaning towards this guy, Jarrett. And he goes, let me tell you, he's the guy that is never going to be satisfied. He's never going to be happy. He's the guy that is going to continue to push, and he's going to continue to want, and frankly, he's going to exhaust you. Well, I've got 7 days worth of text messages at 5:30 in the morning that prove it. But you know what? That was absolutely what I wanted. I wanted somebody that's going to constantly push the envelope, constantly try to grow, and that was going to try and grow his team. And so I understood what Jared's vision was for BCC. And despite the early issues that were of no fault of his own, you know, we supported that. We believed in that. And that is of critical importance, that once you've made that decision, you need to trust in that and you need to back that decision. When we talk about vision, this is about seeing things for what they can be, not for what they are. And as is the case with BCC, we may be a country club, but our focus has been on golf. And that's been the case, I would imagine, with a lot of your clubs as well. But what happens when we start to see things in our other amenities through that same lens that we see golf? How does that part affect our vision? Well, we begin to see things differently. We see opportunities for growth, opportunities to become more relevant, opportunities for improvement, connection, community, and of course, participation. But here's the challenge: is how do we make others believe? We have to tell them. We can't be afraid to innovate. We have to make sure that we're setting that vision and that we're executing on that vision. But the important piece is not just what you believe, it's getting your rackets committee, whether it's squash, tennis, paddle. It's making sure that your board of governors is also buying into what your vision is. And it's not just related to one sport or one amenity. It's got to be club-wide. It has to be, it needs to be pervasive. One of the things that excited us about Jarrett was his insistence on pickleball. And that was a key aspect of his vision and how he was going to be able to grow all of our other racket sports just by the simple addition of pickleball. We had nothing to lose in that respect, so we supported that piece, and his vision has played out as a result. Where we talk about that 85% crossover, the amount of golfers that now are out playing pickleball, whether it's before they go out and play golf or after, that is a true thing that actually occurs. Pickleball has since been just the catalyst for an explosive growth with that cross-member and sport utilization. It's just been absolutely dynamic. Wake up, be awesome, and repeat. And this is one of the things that I like to talk about a lot, is providing your teams with the tools to believe and inspire. There is nothing more critical that once you've selected the right people, you need to give them what they need in order to be successful. But these tools, they go far beyond just the physical aspects of what you're providing in your club. Your team has got to know what they're working towards. They have to be able to see the results of their work. You have to be able to demonstrate your belief in them. You have to be able to communicate effectively your vision and the results, what's going to happen when they buy into this. And so where Jared and I differ a little bit is in some of the vocabulary that we use. I don't care for the words passion and motivation, right? I'm passionate about my bourbon collection. I'm passionate about some other things, but that doesn't inspire me. What inspires me are our people. It's watching them, it's watching our team, it's watching them grow. It's watching our members react to the programming that we're providing. That's what makes me, that's just what keeps me going. So it's important that we believe in our teams. It's important that we believe in the programs that we're providing. But we also need to know where we're drawing that inspiration from. That's critical, critical stuff. And then once you know that, how are you communicating that to your team, right? So when do you know? It's when you know that your vision is really starting to cascade down through the layers, whether it's your club membership and your board, your committees, or your executive team, your managers, and your hourly, is when you start to hear them talk about it. And again, this goes back to my earlier point about if you're not discussing your mission, if you're not discussing your vision, and one time, folks, is not enough. You've got to be talking and communicating this on a regular basis. Build your bench, develop your team, and win the match, to bring in a little tennis lingo there, Jarrett. So we have to know too that it's okay to invest in youth, as long as we select those that we have their best interest in mind that align with ours. That should be part of our vision. For BCC, as one of the larger clubs and one of the top clubs in the country, we believe that it's our duty, that it's our responsibility to grow the future generations of rackets. What we have to remember is that it's not just about building for today, but it's tomorrow and the day after that. So it's not just important to build your bench, we need to stack the bench. When we talk about developing our team, it's about executing on the staff. Jared's vision for building a team was not people who just sought a career in rackets. He wanted players. He wanted players that were passionate about the game. And so that's the team that he selected. And so now I'm fortunate to have a former USTA Tour player, Colin Johns, as our head pro, who also just now with his brother is the #1 doubles pickleball player in the world. How awesome is that to have on our team? Alex Kiblin, our junior director, or Brandon Day, who was one of our summer interns this year, who's now taken a lot of what he's learned and is taken that back to his school and to some of his colleagues. That to me is what this is all about. We need to make sure that we are spending the time to develop our team. But it's not just walking them through the motions. It is about believing in them and inspiring them. It's about showing them how to be successful both on the court and off the court. What does it take to be successful? What does success look like? Do we measure success? Is it monetary? No, we need to measure success in the terms of participation and how we help others to grow. And then we need to expect their best. And I mean their best. And if they don't give it, we need to demand it. This is never something that's going to be 100%, but that doesn't mean that we don't strive for that. But if you get somebody that just, you've tried after this first several months and they just don't get it, then we need to remember that if we can't change the people, that we need to change the people. That is really important to remember too. Some people, no matter how hard you try, they may not get it, but that's okay. Sometimes their value is better beyond. But to win the match, we need to make sure that we're playing the long game. We need to make sure that whatever vision that you create, that model has got to be sustainable and it has to be repeatable. And that's why we can't necessarily legislate and make decisions on the types of things and the explosive growth that we're seeing related to COVID-19. So where do you start? Well, it all has to start with fundamentals. We have to start with the basic core values and beliefs of what's important to you as a leader or as a director of rackets. And so for us, we attributed this to what we refer to as the BCC Core 4. Do what's right, not what's easy. Make sure that you're taking ownership and be accountable. Jared mentioned that we said early on that if you're going to fail, that's okay. But if you're going to do it, fail big. Don't just take these little calculated steps. That's not what we want. But if you do make a mistake, own it and be accountable for it. If you do something great, own that too. Empowerment through opportunity. And this is perhaps one of my most favorite part of the Core 4. And I'll talk about this in just a second. But it's being impactful with your actions. And this is really what helps to connect the dots. It's about active listening. And imagine the things that we hear, the opportunities that we have when we simply listen to the things that members say to us, right? Or if we take this little tidbit of information and then we develop that and we make it into something bigger. Alex Kiblin, who's our junior director, our kids love him. And if our kids love him, guess what? Their parents love him. And it's a little thing like this. Alex, for all the kids that he teaches, whether it's squash or tennis, over the course of the winter months, he goes to Five Below and he buys and wraps them each a Christmas gift, right? These are not things that are just, it's not off the reservation stuff. It's simple, but it's actionable. It's him being impactful. And what response does he get from those kids? Well, they want to come back. And again, we know that as leaders, when we get the kids, we get the parents. It's amazing how those things work. The other one just happened a couple of months ago, a month ago. We had this young kid, Mr. Prendeville, unfortunately tripped over his dog and broke his leg. But preceding that, all of what this kid did, he loved our clinics because he knew that when he did something well, he was going to get chocolate. And his mom was not going to allow him to have chocolate at home. So one of the favorite games was King of the Courts, right? And so when he broke his leg and he wasn't able to come back to the courts, Jared here decides that he's going to have a little fun and sends him $100 worth of Godiva chocolate addressed to the king from BCC Rackets. How difficult is it for us to capitalize on those moments and send those types of messages to our families? Build genuine relationships, engage, be passionate, present, and empathetic. I've got news for you. This is not something that can be faked. If you truly want to be a successful leader, whether it's as a GM or as a director of rackets, an events coordinator, whatever it is, you cannot fake this. Your actions, your messaging, all of it, it must be genuine and it must be authentic. If you do anything less of that, you are going to be found out. We can all think of those movie clips where somebody's talking about somebody else, not realizing that that other person is behind them. And the one I thought about was a little too inappropriate for playing, but still. But we have to remember that it's this level of connection that's what keeps us relevant. It's what keeps people coming to your club. And lastly is be extraordinary, going beyond expectations. That's our standard. Well, those stories that I just told you, we refer to those as green folder stories. Those are our extraordinary moments. And so we actually incentivize our team based on the quality of the green folder stories that they're presenting, that they're trying to achieve by listening to those little tiny details. But how difficult when, you know, there's a moment that we have somebody that was having eye surgery, that Jared sends a handwritten card and sends flowers. How does that resonate with your members? To us, that's our standard. That's going beyond expectations. It's not just what happens at your facility. We need to remember that. Our members are still members once they drive out of your driveway. We also created what we refer to as our care philosophy. And this is about our creating a genuine approach to hospitality. But hospitality, this is the most basic function of hospitality. This is how we treat other people, golden rule type of stuff. This is not rocket science by any step of the imagination. We also have to achieve budgeted goals, because if we don't do that, well, we can't give Jarrett the things that he's asking for. Hence the reason 90% of us saying no, right? Respect and dignity for all, critical, important. And then exceptional experiences at all times. You'll notice that there's a recurring theme here. Jared is always very quick to tell me how great his numbers are. And I refer him all the time back to participation. But then he'll come back and he'll tell me how great things are again and how they're crushing it in the middle of COVID, all of which I agree with. And then we'll have a conversation and I'll walk down to the courts. And we'll see, and we talk about what we refer to as the 12%, right? The 12%. We've now addressed all of those bigger issues that have occurred that needed to be identified and rectified. But now you've got that 12%. Look at your foot baths. Look at where you're collecting your Hartrue. Look at your bulletin boards. Look at how your water station is. Is it free of fingerprints? You've got to be making sure that you're looking at those little finite details that are what are truly going to separate you from any other part of the operation. And we have to remember that your club is your community. This has never been more important than what we've experienced during COVID. We have absolutely, and I'm sure that all of you would agree, that we have seen just explosive growth, not just in rackets, but the amount of people that are playing golf, the amount of people that are using the pool, even if it's by reservations, because this has been their safe haven. This has been the environment that they have felt safe in, that they trust not only the management, but they trust the other members to make the right decision. But let me tell you folks that pickleball has played a significant role in that community, right? So it is not uncommon now for us to see, as Jarrett said, we have mom and dad that maybe dad plays golf in the morning and mom plays tennis, but then mom brings the kids to tennis camp, but then they leave and they go to the pool. And then they, guess what? They go back and they play pickleball for dinks and drinks down in the afternoon. And then that whole group of 30 or 40 people now comes up to the clubhouse and goes to dinner. So it is absolutely incredible how this community has worked and how pickleball has really contributed to that. But there is no doubt that clubs with racket sports are significantly contributing to the overall club experience at this point in time. And lastly, I just want to talk about culture. Your culture is your legacy, whether that is positive or negative. But you as the leaders, you must be the biggest believers and your biggest advocates for the culture that you deserve and the culture that your club needs. And I sort of laugh at some of these pictures because I'm going to point out the one in the middle specifically. So we had an event that it was a Middle Eastern themed event at the pool for one of our Friday night pool parties. And I said, you know, how are we really going to make this event fantastic? And we sort of went around and around and I said, you know what? I need camels, right? I need camels. Camels are going to make this event fantastic. And I cannot begin to tell you the commentary when these camels are being unloaded and walked across the parking lot to the pool. Right? This is about your need to be innovative. Remember, innovation is the pirate ship that sails into the yacht club. This is our time to be bold, to be engaged, and to be involved. But being involved isn't just with your members, it's being involved with your team. Being down with them and understanding the things that they're going through, the things that they're observing. How are we there to make this a favorite place for them? And finally, I want to remember too that this is all about our people. And this is about your ability to select the right people, the people that are going to challenge us to be better. Because in the end, it's the A players that hire A players and the B players that hire C players. We cannot be afraid for our own survival just because we're hiring somebody that's going to push us to be better. We need to make sure that what we care about in the end is the environment and the culture that we have provided for our members and for our team. Because when that is sustainable and when that is repeatable, we will have created an environment that inspires others that you are proud of as well as your team. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Wow. I don't know. I didn't see any questions pop up throughout, so I'm going to give everyone a second to think. But, you know, interestingly enough, I had jotted down a few myself just to be prepared for this. And unfortunately for you two, you both answered most of them through your presentation. Sort of taking a look tactically at your relationship. I mean, several of us up here, those that have golf courses and have sort of founded clubs off of the game of golf, we also often find challenges with the whole, you know, I'll call it, for lack of a better term, bifurcation, if you will, of golf members versus rackets members and so forth. And obviously you've found a balance, and I think a lot of it has to do with Kent, your sort of open-mindedness and leadership through that culture, and Jarrett, your relationship with Kent and the membership, frankly. Tell me a little bit about what your sort of regular communication schedule is, just the two of you personally. We've got directors of rackets on the call, we've got GMs, we have assistants, we have all kinds of leadership from clubs up here. I'd love to sort of give everyone a couple of takeaways that, if we're not doing already with our communication styles, is there something that you both do on a weekly basis or a daily basis that you think is critical to the success of the Rackets programs?
I think first and foremost is we text a lot. I don't think there's many mornings that go by that I don't have a text from Jared at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning that, with another one of his harebrained ideas of how we're going to increase volume at our Rackets programs, or, the arguments between participation and revenue. But regular communication is important. I'm glad that Jared feels comfortable enough that, we can have that type of open relationship and communication. On a more formal basis, we have our regular executive meetings like everybody else, but then we also conduct what we refer to as leadership huddles. And those occur pretty much, on a regular basis about every 3 weeks. And that's just a check-in to talk about where we are with goals, where we are, regarding budget, where we are in terms of, programs and different things like that. The other piece of this that bears importance too is answering any question or any concern that comes in immediately. And that's one thing that I think we've done a lot of coaching through with Jared coming on, and especially some of the challenges that we had early on in Jared's tenure, is how we address those concerns, the timeliness of how we address those concerns, and the integrity and honesty in which we address those concerns.
Matt, real quick, the chat is disabled on the screen.
Huh. I do have one question. I don't know if that's prohibiting people from sending something in, but someone was able to send one through Sally that I'll ask. So this comes from someone with no tennis, but is just launching pickleball with one court to start. How do you recommend they get a pro, and how do you recommend introducing it to the membership?
Well, I mean, especially like we were talking about earlier, up by you, there's so many pros, but, whether you have one court, whether you have no rackets program, we, in the wintertime, we've done pickleball in ballrooms, and, I've talked about Mapei courts and other things that you could put down in its place. The main thing is that you do it. And there's plenty of places like the Professional Pickleball Registry or different avenues that you can call to get information about pros. Feel free to email me and I could give you a list of some pros that are up there. But, I can just tell you just all around you, from Greenwich Country Club to Weeburn to Aspertuck and all those other clubs up there, pickleball's everywhere now. So, the biggest thing about being a director, a successful director, is your network. Like, who are you friends with? And, I think the more successful you are, the more successful your friends are as well, because everybody helps each other. So I think you're in a great area up there where there's just unlimited options that you could call. Same thing with paddle. But absolutely use my number if you guys need any help with that.
Great, appreciate that. Sally has fixed the chat, so if there's any other questions, we'll give you another couple minutes. We're near at the end of our time, but give another minute if anyone has a question, or if someone on the line just wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, feel free. Real quickly, you mentioned the tremendous growth in people exploring pickleball and racket sports as a whole. What do you attribute as the growth due to COVID versus what will kind of carry on over time?
So we've had pretty substantial growth even before COVID. Triple-digit growth from day one, all the way forward. I think that you're seeing a bump in tennis at all clubs. In general, in this country, tennis is down because there's no stars anymore. There's no Sampras's, Agassi's, Chang's, Couriers, all the American players. And as soon as the international stars like Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic retire, there's nothing. So, tennis in general has been failing, and that's really what has had a bump in this country. And, where I would be a little cautious is saying that, a lot of directors and clubs might not be innovative right now and not be investing in pickleball and paddle and other racket sports because there's a Band-Aid on it right now with COVID. You could say, oh, tennis is doing well, we're not going to do anything. And I think the Band-Aid is going to get ripped off in about a year. And the clubs that really invested in rackets, that are really doing pickleball and paddle and squash and the other ones, you are going to soar. And I think the clubs that haven't are going to they're going to they're going to go under. And I think the same thing is the same for country clubs. The clubs that invest in amenities are the ones that are doing great, and the clubs that haven't are the ones that are complaining and saying it's the times that they're not doing well. But whatever you put in is what you get out. And I tell us to Kent all the time about indoor courts is, you have to spend money to make money, and you have to invest in staff to have the return. So, I think COVID has given us a bump. I think this summer, for us as an example, we would have been very busy regardless. But, the other thing with COVID is you have to be ready for it, right? So why we were busier than most even with COVID, because when most people were on quarantine, we sold over 100 pickleball paddles. We sold over 100 nets, I think 300 balls. We went to people's houses and set up pickleball courts in their driveway. So we were keeping people in the community connected. So when our governor announced at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday that we'd be opening 7 a.m. on Wednesday, we were ready to hit the ground running with programming open. We didn't have to take a couple weeks to get up and going. So again, it goes back to your team and what you're prepared for. I think that, I don't think I've ever worked more than when we were in quarantine, as far as just the constant communication and how things have to happen exactly when they need to happen. So, for me, that's what it is.
Great insight. We have one more question. A lot of people just expressing their thanks and job well done, but I'll just ask this last question as we wrap up. It's from a member who has 3 indoor pickleball courts and a multi-sport court. They're looking to build a facility for pickleball. In the meantime, how do we squash the negativity from tennis players if we add lines to tennis courts?
So this is what you're going to have. And before, I've seen it all, even when pickleball was starting. You have the people that complain about the sound, and that's basically stopped about now. And, you kind of have to drown out the sound in a way, and you have to be able to, if people play tennis, I've heard, if people switch to pickleball, they're just going to not play tennis. Now, if people switch to pickleball and don't play tennis, they're going to quit playing tennis anyways. So when you look at clubs that have the blended lines down, if you have hard courts, tennis courts, that's the best thing you can do, because you can put pickleball courts on your hard courts just by putting tape down and pulling it up. And I'm always going to be a fan of multiple use facilities, 2 revenue streams, 2 amenities over 1. So I'd rather have 3 indoor hard courts and know that in 30 minutes I could put down 12 pickleball courts and then in 5 minutes pull them up, than have 10 indoor pickleball courts and only be able to use them for pickleball and possibly 10 under tennis. But I think that this is changing constantly because of the growth in pickleball. So you're going to always have those people that simply are going to be, I only want to play tennis. I think they're getting less and less. I think the challenge, every time I hear a complaint, I see it as an opportunity to change an experience. So how can you communicate with those people? How do you get them out just to try it? There's going to be people that hate pickleball. There's people that hate tennis. There's people that hate everything. But in the end, there's no stop. Pickleball is, like I said, it's going to be #1 played racket sport in the country, and very soon. So, it's either you get on the ship or you don't, but that's where the play is. Same thing with tournaments. USTA is complaining because nobody's running tournaments right now, but you can get 16 to 32 people for a tennis tournament. That really takes up a whole weekend. I just did almost 300 people. We would have got over 300 if it wasn't COVID, and that's on the same weekend. So people are going to invest where the opportunity is to put more people on the courts. So I wouldn't focus on the people complaining. I'd focus on the opportunity.
Great answer. Well, gentlemen, really appreciate your time. I love the sort of relationship that you both have, and it was helpful for me, and I think that many of us on the call would agree. So appreciate it. I have Kent and Jarrett's contact information, and Sally will have that as well. So if anybody on the webinar wants to get some more information or wants to reach out to either of you, I hope that's okay that we share that with the group. And appreciate everything you guys are doing for the industry and your leadership at Baltimore, and appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Everyone have a great day.
I just stopped the video.